Sophia had always lived in the background, a silent figure among the bustling office workers, armed with a mop and bucket instead of a briefcase. She never imagined she'd be singled out, especially not by David, the stern and distant company CEO. But today, everything was different. Sophia, drop everything and get ready. You're coming with me to the meeting, David announced casually, his voice calm but commanding. He stood tall, a man who seemed to belong to a world of marble floors and glass boardrooms, not the dingy backrooms where she toiled away. Me? Are you sure? Sophia asked, her voice trembling. She instinctively clutched the cleaning rag in her hand, her mind racing. Why would he choose her? Out of all the people in the office, what could he possibly want from someone like her? David looked at her with faint disdain. Yes, you. Who else? His tone made it clear that this wasn't a request, but an order. You have an hour. Be ready. Her heart pounded in her chest. An hour to prepare for something she couldn't even comprehend. She wasn't someone who attended meetings. She was a cleaner, invisible to the critical people in the office. But Sophia knew she couldn't refuse. Sophia rushed out of the office, leaving her cleaning supplies in a messy heap behind her. As she hurried home, her thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. Why had David chosen her? The question echoed in her mind, but there was no time to dwell on it. She lived close to the office, a small mercy in a life filled with hardships. The apartment she returned to was a tiny, government-provided room, just big enough for a bed, a wardrobe, and a small table. The walls were closing in on her as she scrambled to get ready. She threw off her proprieties, staring at her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. Her hair, usually tied up in a messy bun, hung loosely around her shoulders, tangled and dull. This is impossible, she muttered under her breath. How could she be presentable with people like David in just an hour? Sophia's mind raced with the bit of time she had. There was no hot water, no luxury of a proper shower. She would have to wash her hair quickly and dry it with the heat from the gas burner, a trick she'd learned from years of surviving in this cramped space. Time was slipping through her fingers like sand, and she couldn't afford to waste a second. Sophia's life had never been easy. Orphaned at a young age, she had grown up in a series of foster homes before finally being placed in this communal apartment. The room she called home was little more than a glorified closet, with walls so thin she could hear every argument, every crying child, and every step her neighbors took. She shared the apartment with 3 other families, each more chaotic than the last. Amelia, the loudest and most unjust of them all, was authoritative of 4 unruly children. She controlled the communal kitchen like a tyrant, leaving little room for anyone else to use it. Sophia often uses hours just to heat water for tea, let alone cook a proper meal. Amelia had once yelled at her, "What makes you so special, Sophia? We all pay the same here. If you don't like it, find somewhere else to live." But there was nowhere else for Sophia to go. This tiny room, this miserable life, was all she had. The situation with the gas was the same. There was only the same, and everyone paid equally, despite Amelia using it for more than anyone else. Sophia had thought about buying an electric kettle to at least have hot water for herself. But when she tried, the ancient wiring in the building couldn't handle the extra power. The fuses blew, and Amelia screamed at her afterward. "You think you're better than the rest of us?" She'd shouted as if Sophia's small act of defiance had been a personal attack. Now, with less than an hour with Thea hurried into the communal kitchen, praying it would be empty. Thankfully, Amelia and her kids were nowhere to be seen. She quickly turned on the gas burner and began drying her hair over the flames. A risky method, but the only one she had time for. As she leaned over, a sudden shout from behind startled her. "What the hell are you doing?" It was Amelia, back from the market with her children in tow. Before Sophia could react, a lock of her hair caught in the flame, igniting in an instant. Panic surged instantly as the fire spread, and the smells of burning hair filled the room. "You idiot!" Amelia screamed, grabbing a towel and throwing it over Sophia's head, smothering the flames. The fire was out, but the damage was done. Her beautiful, long hair was ruined, singed beyond repair. Sophia stood frozen, the shock setting in. She had no time to process the disaster. In less than 45 minutes, David would be outside waiting for her. There was no time to fix her hair or change what had swallowed her tears. Sophia tied what remained of her hair into a bun, put on her mother's old dress, and stepped out into the world. She couldn't afford to break down now. This was her life, always on the edge of survival, one step away from disaster. But something about today felt different. Today, she was walking into the unknown. Sophia arrived at the front of the building just as David's sleek car pulled up. Her heart was pounding in her chest, not just from the rush, but from the humiliation still burning in her mind. Her hair was ruined. She was wearing her mother's dress, and she had no idea why she was going to this meeting in the first place. She fully expected David to take one look at her and send her back inside. But instead, David stepped instead car, barely acknowledging her appearance, and gestured for her to get in. "We're running late," he said, his tone neutral. Sophia felt a wave of relief wash over her. Maybe, just maybe, he hadn't noticed how disastrous she looked. They drove silently for what felt less than an eternity before pulling up to a place Sophia had only seen in magazines, an upscale beauty salon that catered to the city. Catering opened the door and motioned for her to follow him inside. "We don't have time for you to explain. Just trust me," he said curtly. The moment they stepped into the salon, Sophia was whisked away by a team of stylists, all clicking their tongues in disapproval as they assessed the damage. "What happened here, dear?" one asked, looking at the ends of her once beautiful hair. Once beautiful to dry it quickly," Sophia mumbled, embarrassed. The head stylist shook her head. "We'll have to cut it. No way around it. But don't worry, darling. We'll make you look stunning." Sophia sat there in stunned silence as the stylist worked her magic. She wasn't used to such attention, wasn't used to anyone treating her like she mattered. An hour later, she barely recognized herself. Her hair had been cut into a sleek, asymmetrical bob that framed her face perfectly. Her makeup was subtle but sophisticated, and the stylist even found her a modern, tailored outfit that replaced her mother's old dress. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, Sophia gasped. She looked nothing like the girl who had rushed out of the apartment just an hour ago. "She looks beautiful, for the first time in years here." Head high, the car pulled up in front of a towering glass building for the first time in years, and Sophia's stomach churned with nerves. She had no idea what role she was supposed to play in this meeting or why David had brought her along. But there was no turning back now. Inside, the boardroom was filled with people who looked like they belonged in magazines, polished, sharp, and intimidating. David took his seat at the head of the table and motioned for Sophia to sit beside him. She did, feeling out of place in a room full of people who didn't expect to see a cleaner among them. The meeting began, and soon, they discussed the contract terms with their foreign partners, all in English. But as the document was passed around, something caught Sophia's eye. She glanced at the Chinese version of the contract and froze. "David," she whispered softly, leaning toward him. "Some mistake in the translation." David raised an eyebrow. "A mistake? What do you mean?" Sophia pointed at the document. "The English translation doesn't match the original Chinese text. If this contract is signed as is, it could cause serious legal problems down the road. The Chinese matter, and it's not saying the same thing." David looked at her, stunned. "You can read Chinese?" "Yes," Sophia replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I lived there with my parents until I was 10. A murmur spread through the room as David stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "we're postponing signing this contract for review. My consultant has discovered a discrepancy in the translation that needs to be addressed." Sophia's heart raced. She had just saved David's company from what could have been a disaster. But more than that, she had proved to herself that she was more than just a cleaner. After the meeting, David pulled Sophia aside. "I had no idea you could read Chinese," he said, his voice filled with surprise and admiration. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sophia shrugged, feeling a bit shy. "I didn't think it mattered. It's not exactly something that comes up when mopping floors." David was about to respond when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. I need to make a call. Wait here, he said, stepping away. As Sophia waited, she overheard a conversation between two men near the door. They were discussing Ethan, David's childhood friend and business partner. The more she listened, the more horrified she became. Ethan was responsible for the faulty contract. He had intentionally allowed the translation error to slip through, hoping it would sabotage David's business while he quietly made his exit to another company. Sophia's stomach twisted. She had always thought Ethan was trustworthy, just like David had. But now it was clear that Ethan had been planning to betray his friend for months. When David returned, Sophia told him everything she had overheard. His face tightened with anger, but he remained calm. "Thank you for telling me. I'll handle this," he said, his voice cold. Later that evening, David confronted Ethan with the knowledge that his friend had been planning to ruin him. It wasn't just a faulty contract. It was much deeper than that. But as David dug into Ethan's betrayal, something else came to light that shook Safor. Ethan wasn't just a business partner or a childhood friend. He was the same man who had once been appointed as her guardian after her parents died in that tragic accident years ago. Sophia had never known much about the man who was supposed to care for her after she was orphaned. All she knew was that her parents' business and assets had been sold off, and the man responsible had disappeared, leaving her to fend for herself in a system that didn't care. Now, standing in David's of standing keys started falling into place. Ethan had been that man, her supposed guardian, who had stolen everything from her and disappeared without a trace. David was just as shocked. "You mean Ethan took everything that belonged to you? Your family's business? Their money?" he asked, staring at her in disbelief. Sophia nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "He left me with nothing. I didn't even know his name until now." David clenched his fists. "He's going to pay for this. I'll make sure of it." Sophia felt relief and gratitude, but also a deep sadness in her heart. She had finally uncovered the truth about her past, but it had come at a terrible cost. Ethan, the man who had betrayed her, was also the man who had nearly ruined David's business. Everything was connected in ways she could never have imagined. The following day, David arranged a meeting with Ethan in his office. He wanted to confront his former friend face to face, to hear from Ethan's lips how he could betray him and Sophia. When Ethan walked into the room, he still wore the same confident smirk, but it quickly faded as he saw the cold fury in David's eyes. "Ethan," David began, his voice low and controlled. "I know everything. The contract, your attempt to sabotage my business, and most importantly, what you did to Sophia all those years ago." Ethan's face drained of color. "David, save it." David cut him off, standing up from behind his desk. "You robbed a child of her inheritance, her parents' legacy, and left her parents, and you thought you could do the same to me? After everything we've been through?" Ethan stumbled over his words, trying to deny the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. David had spent the entire night gathering documents, tracing the sale of Sophia's family business back to Ethan. His betrayal ran deep, and there was no way out. "You'll pay for this, Ethan," David said, his voice shaking with emotion. "Not just for me, but for Sophia. I'll make sure the authorities know everything." Ethan's shoulders slumped as the weight of his actions settled on him. There was no escaping the consequences now. David had the power to ruin him, both legally and financially. As security escorted Ethan out of the office, Sophia watched from the doorway, her emotions swirling. She thought she would feel relief seeing him brought to justice, but she felt a deep sadness. The man who had destroyed her family's future had once been trusted by both her parents and David. He was nothing more than a fallen figure, consumed by his own greed. After Ethan was gone, David turned to Sophia. His expression softened as he approached her, standing just inches away. "I'm so sorry for everything you've been through," he said quietly. "I had no idea Ethan was capable of this." Sophia shook her head. "It's not your fault. I'm just relieved that it's over, that the truth is out." David looked at her, his eyes filled with admiration and regret. "You saved my company, Sophia. Without you, I would have sidetracked, and Ethan would have destroyed everything. I owe you more than I can say." Sophia smiled faintly, but there was a question lingering in her mind. What happens now? She asked. To me? To you, to us? David took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto hers. I don't know what the future holds, he admitted, but I do know that I don't want you to leave. Not just the company, but my life. You're more than just a translator or an employee to me. You've become someone I can't imagine being without. Sophia's heart fluttered at his words, but she remained cautious. David, I don't know if I'm ready for anything like that. My life has been so uncertain for so long. He nodded, understanding the hesitation in her voice. I'm not asking for anything right now. Just don't disappear. Let's take this one step at a time. Sophia smiled, a genuine smile this time. One step at a time, she agreed. Days turned into weeks, and as Sophia continued working with David, she slowly began to rebuild her sense of self. Knowing that Ethan's betrayal was behind her, she felt free in a way she hadn't in years. David kept his word, offering her a position as a consultant for his Chinese partners. She embraced the role, feeling both challenged and fulfilled in a way she never had as a cleaner. Their relationship also began to deepen, though they both tread carefully. David was patient, never pushing Sophia beyond what she was comfortable with. They would spend time together after work, discussing life and their discussing dreams. It was a slow, steady process of getting each other, not just as colleagues, but as two people who had been through their own versions of loss and Beale. But the specter of Ethan's deceit still lingered in Sophia's mind. Could she fully trust David, knowing she had been close to the man who had destroyed her life? She wrestled with these thoughts, even as she began to open her heart to him. One evening, as they sat together in a quiet restaurant, David broke the silence. Sophia, I've been thinking a lot about what happened to Ethan, and I realized that no matter how much we try to move forward, we can't pretend the past didn't happen. I don't want there to be any more secrets between us. Sophia looked at him, her heart pounding. What do you mean? I want you to know I'm here for you, for whatever you need. And if that means waiting or taking more time, then that's what I'll do. But I also need you to know I've fallen in love with you, Sophia, and I don't want to lose you. Sophia felt her breath catch in her throat. She had been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't allowed herself to realize her feelings fully. But now, as David's words sank in, she knew the truth. She had fallen for him too. Sophia felt like she had a choice for the first time in a long time. She wasn't being forced into anything, wasn't being manipulated by circumstances beyond her control. David had given her the freedom to decide what she wanted, which was more valuable and more valuable. After a long pause, Sophia finally spoke. David, I don't know if I'm ready for love yet, but I do know that I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I want to see where this goes, but must do it at my own pace. David smiled, relief washing over him. That's all I'm asking for. Take as much time as you need. Their relationship continued to grow, but it was on Sophia's terms this time. She no longer felt like the powerless orphan left to fend for herself. For the first time, she felt like she was in control. Several months passed, and Sophia had settled into her new life, both personally and professionally. She had grown into her role at the company and was thriving in her partnership with David. They were happy, even if they still took things slowly. One day, as Sophia went through some old documents about her family's business, she stumbled upon a letter she hadn't seen before. It was from someone in China, a distant relative she had never known existed. The letter explained that this relative had been searching for her for years, wanting to reconnect and help her reclaim her family's legacy. With trembling hands, Sophia read through the letter, her emotions swirling. This was a piece of her past she had never expected to find, a link to the family she had lost so long ago. The letter invited her to come to China to visit the home where her parents lived and meet the relatives waiting for her. Sophia's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so long running from her past, trying to forget the pain of what she had lost. But now, she had a chance to reclaim it, to honor her parents' memory in a way she had never thought possible. That evening, she told David about the letter. I think it's time for me to return, she said softly, to see where I came from, to meet the people who knew my parents. David looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "I'll be here when you're ready to return," he said, gently taking her hand. And with that, Sophia knew that her journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Sophia's story is a powerful reminder of resilience and the strength to overcome the odds. From being a simple cleaner, haunted by the injustices of her past, to becoming an integral part of David's company and reclaiming her true identity, Sophia shows us that we are more than the circumstances that try to hold us back. Her journey of self-discovery, forgiveness, and newfound love serves as an inspiration for us all. In the end, Sophia takes control of her and finds the courage in her past, discovering a long-lost connection to her family. With David by her side, she moves forward, not as a victim of fate, but as a woman in charge of her destiny. At Life Stories Across Borders, we believe in the power of storytelling to heal and inspire. If Sophia's journey touched you, subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this, stories that cross borders, time, and emotions. Together, let's celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for watching. And remember, everyone's story has the power to change lives. Like, share, and subscribe to Life Stories Across Borders for more heartwarming and transformative narratives.